My wife told me Alan Hart was a client. His funeral notice called her his fiancée of 7 years. I found out on a Sunday morning while Beth was upstairs deciding what to wear to his memorial service. She had left the funeral home's website open on the tablet beside the couch. I was not looking for anything. I picked it up because I wanted to check the weather before taking the dog around the block. Alan's photograph filled the screen. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, smiling beside a lake. I recognized him from the holiday cards Beth's firm mailed to its larger clients. Under the photograph was a paragraph about his career, his volunteer work, and his late wife, Marianne. Then I reached the final sentence. Alan is survived by his sister, Karen Hart Lowe, and by Beth Miller, his beloved fiancée and companion of 7 years. Beth Miller was my wife. Miller was her maiden name. We had been married for 19 years. I read the sentence again. Then I scrolled back to the photograph. There was a second image beneath it. Alan stood on the porch of a cedar cabin with one arm around Beth. She wore a blue dress I remembered because I had helped zip it before what she called a client retention dinner. On her left hand was a ring I had never seen. Upstairs, a closet door opened and closed. I set the tablet on the coffee table and waited. Beth came down 10 minutes later in a black dress and low heels. She was 46, composed even when she was tired, and almost impossible to read when she wanted to be. She worked as a financial advisor for a private wealth management firm. She spent her days asking people questions about the future and making them feel responsible for the answers. "Is that too formal?" she asked. I looked at the ring on her left hand. It was the wedding band I had put there 19 years earlier. "The funeral notice says you were engaged to Alan." Beth did not move. For 1 second, I saw the answer before she built the explanation. "What?" I turned the tablet toward her. She walked over, read the line, and covered her mouth. "Oh my God. Is it wrong?" "Of course it's wrong. There is a picture of you wearing a ring." Beth stared at the screen. "That was a client event. At a cabin? Alan hosted retreats there. Why does his family think you were his fiancée?" She sat down slowly. "He was attached to me. Attached enough to tell people you were engaged. Thomas, he just died." "I know. His sister wrote this. She is grieving. I am not going to attack her over one sentence in an obituary." "Was he your client?" "Yes." "Only your client?" Beth looked toward the front window. "He became a friend." That was the first change. Client became friend before I had finished asking whether client was true. "For 7 years. I managed his accounts for almost 9. That isn't what the notice says." "I didn't write it." "Did he propose to you?" "No." "Did you tell his sister you were engaged?" "No." "Did you wear that ring in the picture?" She pressed her lips together. "It was a gift. From Alan." "Yes." I nodded because I did not trust myself to speak. Beth reached for my hand. "He was a lonely man after Marianne died. I helped him through a difficult period. His family saw what they wanted to see." I moved my hand away. "What did he see?" "I don't know. You were his financial advisor. You wore his ring. You attended private events at his cabin. You have to know what he thought. This is not the time." "When was the time, Beth?" Her face hardened. "I am going to the service. When I come home, we can talk." "Are you going as his advisor or his fiancée?" She stood. "That was cruel. I am asking because the dead man's family and your husband appear to have different information." I said we will talk later. She picked up her coat and left. I did not follow her to the funeral. I also did not call our daughter. Emily was 23 and living in Baltimore. She adored her mother. I was not going to hand her a sentence from an obituary and ask her to help me decide what it meant. Instead, I took the dog around the block. I remember almost nothing about that walk except that the sun was too bright. The neighborhood looked exactly as it had the day before. People washed cars. A boy practiced free throws in his driveway. Someone had burned toast. My life had changed, and no one else had received the update. Beth and I had met when I was 28 and she was 25. I was finishing my clinical hours in physical therapy. She was studying for her first financial license. We married 3 years later and had Emily the following year. Our marriage was not dramatic. Beth traveled more than I did. She attended planning conferences, client retreats, and quarterly meetings. I worked at a rehabilitation clinic and spent most evenings cooking whatever could be reheated when she got home. For years, I considered our differences useful. Beth pushed us forward. I kept daily life steady. Alan Hart entered her professional life 9 years before his death. I knew his name because he sent expensive pears every Christmas. Beth described him as a widowed manufacturing executive who had sold his company and needed help structuring the rest of his life. Sometimes she called him demanding. Sometimes she called him lonely. Twice a year, she traveled to a lake region 3 hours north for what she called client legacy weekends. She said older clients felt more comfortable discussing wills and trusts outside an office. I never questioned it. The obituary said Beth had been Alan's fiancée for 7 years. 7 years meant the relationship began 2 years after she started managing his money. It also meant there were at least 14 lake weekends I now had to reconsider. When I got home, I opened the funeral page again. I did not search Beth's phone. I did not know her password and did not try to learn it. The obituary was public. So was the memorial gallery. There were 43 photographs. Beth appeared in 12. In one, she and Alan stood beneath a banner that read Hart Family Summer Weekend. The date in the corner was 3 years earlier. Beth had told me she was attending a fiduciary planning seminar. In another, she sat beside Alan at a Thanksgiving table. That year, she had told Emily and me that a snowstorm canceled her flight home from a conference. We ate without her and kept her plate warm until almost midnight. The photograph showed no snow. It showed Beth smiling with Alan's hand resting over hers. The next image was taken at the same cabin. A small wooden sign beside the door said Pine Glass. Beth and Alan stood under it holding champagne glasses. The ring was visible again. The caption said, "To the future." I closed the gallery. At noon, I received a text from Beth. "Service is crowded. Going to Karen's after." I typed, "Does Karen know you are married to me?" I watched the message show as delivered. Beth did not answer. At 1:30, she called. "I cannot do this while I am with his family," she whispered. That is why I asked a yes or no question. They know I was married. Was. Silence. "Beth, do they believe we are divorced?" Alan knew my situation was complicated. My situation is not complicated. You and I are legally married and living in the same house. I need to go. Does Karen know that? The call ended. That was the second change. His family knew she was married became Alan knew her situation was complicated. I wrote both sentences down. For most of my career, I had treated people after injuries. Recovery depends on accurate information. If a patient says the pain is a 3 when it is an 8, I can design the wrong plan. If someone hides a fall, I may strengthen a joint that needs imaging. The body does not care whether a false answer was meant to avoid conflict. It reacts to what happened. By Sunday evening, I knew something had happened. I did not yet know its size. Beth came home shortly after 8. She looked exhausted. Her mascara had smudged beneath one eye. I was at the kitchen table with the memorial gallery open on my laptop. She stopped when she saw it. "You went through the photographs. They are on the funeral website. You spent the day investigating a grieving family." I spent the day finding my wife at their Thanksgiving table. Beth placed her purse on the counter. Alan had no one. He had a sister. He had cousins. He had enough family for a summer weekend. You don't understand. Then explain the Thanksgiving when you said you were trapped by snow. She took off her coat but did not sit. His health was bad that year. You could have told me. You would not have understood why I needed to be there. You are right. I would have had questions about my wife spending Thanksgiving at another man's cabin while wearing his ring. Stop calling it his ring. Did you buy it? She looked away. No. Then I will call it his ring. Beth opened the refrigerator, stared into it, and closed it again. Nothing physical happened, she said. I had not asked that yet. For 7 years. It was emotional. You let him tell his family you were his fiancée. I never used that word. You wore the ring. He gave it to me after a difficult year. I should not have accepted it. Did he believe you would marry him? He knew I cared about him. That is not an answer. I don't know exactly what he believed. He put it in his obituary. He did not write his obituary. Again, almost true. I asked Beth to sleep in the guest room. She did not argue. At 9 the next morning, while I was treating a patient, the clinic receptionist told me I had a call from a David Lowe about a property matter. I did not know the name. He says it concerns your wife, she said. I took the call in my office. Mr. Reed, the man asked. Yes. My name is David Lowe. Alan Hart was my uncle. I am also the executor of his estate. My hand tightened around the phone. What can I do for you? I am trying to confirm the best address for Beth. We need her signature regarding the Pineglass property. What signature? There was a pause. The cabin. She is the surviving co-owner. I looked through the glass wall of my office. One of my assistants was helping a woman practice stepping onto a platform. My wife owns a cabin with Alan. David did not answer immediately. I am sorry, he said. I understood that you and Beth were no longer married. Who told you that? I think this conversation should include Beth. You called me. Your number appears as the alternate contact on an older document. I assumed it was a former household number. What older document? A property insurance form. I closed my office door. How long have they owned the cabin? 6 years. The funeral notice said 7. The cabin came 1 year after the engagement story began. Did Alan believe Beth was divorced? Yes. The answer was immediate. No complicated situation. No emotional misunderstanding. No grieving sister inventing a romance. Yes, he said again. My uncle believed the divorce was final before they bought Pineglass. I sat down. It was never filed. David was silent. Mr. Reed, I am very sorry. Did he know I existed? He knew there was an ex-husband named Thomas and a daughter named Emily. Did he know Beth and I lived together? No. Did his family? No. That was the third change. Beth had gone from advisor, to friend, to emotional companion, to a divorced woman building property with her fiancé. I am not asking you for private estate information, I said. But my wife and I may have shared assets connected to that property. Please send future communication to her directly and note that I dispute any assumption that we were divorced. I will inform the estate attorney. Thank you. Before he hung up, David said, My mother may contact you. She is Alan's sister. She believed Beth would move into the cabin permanently this winter. This winter. I thanked him again and ended the call. My next patient was waiting. I washed my hands, reviewed her chart, and spent 45 minutes helping her regain movement after shoulder surgery. I do not remember driving home. Beth was in the kitchen when I arrived. She had made soup. The smell filled the house, ordinary and warm. David Lowe called me, I said. The spoon slipped from her hand and struck the stove. Why would he call you? My number was on the cabin's insurance paperwork. Beth turned off the burner. Thomas, I can explain the cabin. Good. I sat at the table. Explain it from the beginning. Do not wait for me to tell you what I know. She stayed beside the stove. Alan wanted to buy a place near the lake. It was a good investment. He asked me to take a small share because I helped identify it. How small? Half. That is not a small share. I did not pay half the purchase price. How much did you pay? About 40,000 over time. From where? My personal account. Money earned during our marriage. I never took it from the household. You made a 6-year property investment with a man who called you his fiancée and did not mention it to your husband. Beth sat across from me. I knew how it would look. It looks like what it is. It was supposed to be a retirement asset. Whose retirement? She began to cry. I did not move toward her. David says Alan believed we were divorced. Beth wiped her eyes. I told him we were separated. When? Years ago. We have never separated. Emotionally, we did. You don't get to file an emotional divorce with another man and keep the legal husband uninformed. I was unhappy. Then you had choices. I was afraid. Of losing what? She looked around the kitchen. This. Emily. Our friends. Everything we built. So you kept this and built something else. Beth covered her face. I gave her a minute. Then I asked, did you sleep with him? She lowered her hands. Yes. For how long? 6 years. The answer lined up with the cabin. Did you plan to marry him? We talked about it. You accepted a ring. Yes. Did you plan to move to Pineglass this winter? She looked at the table. After the holidays. The phrase was so ordinary that it hurt more than a dramatic answer. After the holidays meant after Emily came home. After family photographs. After one final version of our marriage had completed its scheduled appearance. When were you going to tell me? January. Alan died before your deadline. Beth nodded. Did he know you had not filed for divorce? He knew it was not finished. David says he believed it was final before the cabin purchase. David did not know everything. Did Alan? He knew enough. That was not an answer I could verify. Alan was dead. Every disputed conversation now existed only inside Beth's version of it. Did you love him? I asked. Yes. It was the first answer she gave me that night without qualification. Do you love me? She cried harder. Yes. I believed she believed both answers. That did not make them compatible. Beth slept in the guest room again. The next morning, I called an attorney who had never worked with Beth or her firm. I explained only what I could document, the obituary, the public photographs, the executor's call, the co-owned property, and Beth's admission. The attorney stopped me twice when I began guessing. We will distinguish marital property from separate property, she said. Do not move money. Do not sign anything. Do not contact the estate directly without advice. That was what I needed. Not a promise that Beth would lose everything. Not a speech about justice. A list of actions that would not make the situation worse. That afternoon, Karen Lowe called me. She was Alan's older sister and David's mother. Her voice shook when she introduced herself. I don't know what Beth told you, she said. Not enough. I thought you were divorced. We are not. Karen began apologizing. I stopped her. Did Beth tell you that directly? Alan did. Beth never discussed you with me in detail. That mattered. Karen had not knowingly helped Beth. She had lived inside Alan's version, and Alan had lived inside Beth's. What did Alan believe would happen this winter? I asked. He believed Beth was moving to Pineglass in January. They had been looking at retirement communities nearby in case the cabin became too difficult later. Did he know she still lived with me? He thought the house was being prepared for sale and that you stayed there when Emily visited. I closed my eyes. Beth had not just omitted me. She had converted my home into a temporary arrangement inside someone else's future. Karen asked if she could send me one document. Only if the estate attorney approves, I said. It is not financial. It is a retirement community brochure Alan gave me. He wrote both their names on the application page. I gave her my attorney's contact information instead of my email. Please send it there. You are being much kinder than I deserve. You did not make vows to me. The sentence felt familiar even though I had never said it before. Karen cried quietly. He loved her, she said. I know. I don't know if that helps. It doesn't. But it is probably true. We ended the call. 2 days later, my attorney confirmed the public property record. Beth and Alan had purchased Pineglass as joint owners with survivorship rights. Alan had paid the down payment. Beth had contributed to renovations and annual costs. The retirement application listed Alan Hart and Beth Miller. Relationship, engaged. Desired move date, January. It did not prove every promise Beth had made. It proved the system. There was a house for her life with me. There was a cabin for her life with Alan. There was a wedding ring she wore at home. There was another ring she wore at the lake. There were conferences on our calendar and family weekends in Alan's photographs. There was a retirement plan in which I was not a husband, only a former chapter who had not yet vacated the property. Every piece served the same story. On Friday, Beth and I sat with a mediator. She wanted to talk about reconciliation. Alan is gone, she said. That relationship is over. I looked at her. His death did not end the deception. It only stopped the schedule. I am telling you everything now. Because there is an executor. That is not fair. Fair would have been January arriving without a funeral notice. Beth lowered her head. The mediator asked what I wanted for the next 30 days. I wanted time. Separate living arrangements. Full financial disclosure. No changes to joint assets. No contact through Emily. Beth agreed to stay with her sister. She asked if we could attend counseling. For communication and closure, I said. Not as a promise to stay married. You have already decided. I have decided that I cannot rebuild while you are still explaining a second life as an emotional response to the first one. We told Emily together that weekend. Beth spoke first. I had another relationship, she said. It lasted a long time, and I lied to both of you about where I was. Emily stared at her mother. Was it Alan? Beth looked surprised. You knew his name? I asked. Emily nodded. Mom used to say he was the client who sent the pairs. Once, when I was home from college, she answered the phone in the garage and said, I love you too, Alan. She told me he was old and confused. Beth covered her mouth. That was another fragment. Emily had carried it for 3 years because the explanation was just believable enough. Why didn't you tell me? Beth asked her. Because you told me not to make something ugly out of a sick man's mistake. Beth began to cry. I reached for Emily's hand. This is not your fault, I said. Did everybody know except Dad? No, I said. Different people knew different pieces. Most of them were given a story that made their piece look harmless. That was the closest I could come to explaining the system without making her responsible for understanding all of it. Emily stayed with me that night. Beth left for her sister's house. Over the next month, the practical consequences arrived without drama. The estate placed Beth in contact with independent counsel regarding the cabin. My attorney reviewed whether any contributions involved marital funds. No one promised me the cabin. No one told me Beth would be left penniless. The facts were complicated, and complicated facts require more than an angry person declaring what should happen. Beth's firm opened an internal review after the executor questioned the personal relationship with a client. I did not contact the firm. I did not need to. Alan's estate had its own obligations, and the company had its own rules. Some of Beth's friends learned the truth. Some stayed close to her. Some called me and tried to explain that she had felt trapped. I stopped taking those calls. Feeling trapped can explain why someone is unhappy. It does not explain purchasing a second future and hiding the receipt for 6 years. Beth and I attended 3 counseling sessions. In the second, she said she had loved Alan because he made her feel like the most important person in the room. And what did I make you feel like? I asked. Safe. The counselor waited. Beth seemed to hear her own answer. Safety was what she wanted to keep while she went somewhere else to feel chosen. I had been the house, the history, the father of her child, and the person who would handle daily life. Alan had been the future she rehearsed in private. That did not mean our marriage had been fake. It meant she had used what was real as support for what she concealed. At the 3rd session, I told Beth I wanted a divorce. She did not beg. She looked tired and older than she had 2 months earlier. If Alan had lived, I asked, would you have left in January? I think so. If the obituary had not named you, would you have told me before then? I don't know. That answer was probably the most honest one she had given me. There were questions I never resolved. I never learned exactly when Alan first called Beth his fiancée. I never learned whether he knew our divorce did not exist or whether Beth had shown him documents that made him believe it did. I never learned whether every lake weekend involved a lie or whether some began as legitimate work. I never learned if Beth loved me, Alan, the stability, the escape, or some mixture she could not separate herself. For a while, those unanswered questions felt like unfinished business. Then I realized certainty was not the same as completion. I knew enough to make a decision. The obituary was real. The cabin was real. The engagement application was real. The photographs, the dates, the money, and the planned January move all belonged to one parallel future. I did not need every private conversation between Beth and a man who could no longer speak. 6 months after Alan's funeral, a certified letter arrived at the house regarding Pineglass. It was addressed to Beth. I did not open it. I forwarded the delivery notice to her attorney and placed the envelope in the document box our mediator had designated. Then I went to work. That evening, I helped a patient take his first unsupported steps after a spinal injury. He crossed 8 feet of floor and cried because 8 feet was farther than he had moved alone in almost a year. Progress did not look dramatic from outside the room. Inside it, everything had changed. When I came home, the house was quiet. Emily had returned to Baltimore. Beth was living in an apartment near her office. The dog lifted his head from the rug and went back to sleep. For 19 years, I believed I knew the shape of my marriage. I had not known every room Beth was living in. I knew which one I would no longer live inside.